Extraordinary checklist of events.
What's the biggest?
Well, the biggest stories in footy are still coach sackings.
No,
but Willie Riola's given
is
it a nice old nudge at the end.
one way of putting it, a nice old nudge. I don't know what he's done. We'll talk about that in a second. No, Willie Riola, big for me. Don Pyke, pretty big. Yeah. Before we get into that, man of a great integrity, Don Pyke. I want to say that off the top of the show. He resigned. Everyone say, no, he's pushed, he was sacked. No, he resigned. So well done to him. Tough decision.
Should we start there?
Why not?
It's the top of the agenda. It's the end for Don Pyke at the Crows. In the postseason, he conducted his own review and his own introspection and decided that he couldn't go on as the senior coach. He becomes the fifth to fall this tumultuous season.
There's no doubt that the last 18 months has been very challenging for all involved at our club, and from a personal viewpoint, particularly frustrating and draining. Further this, I believe, to continue to coach in the current environment the club and myself have endured is simply not sustainable. I therefore feel it is best I make way and allow a fresh and new voice to set a new direction.
There's really, really good people in our football club. And, to end up like this hurts. I won't make any, I can't say it any other way. It hurts. So I'm not happy about it. And I'm still wrestling, right up to the last minute. Is this right? Still not sure, to be honest, right? But Don has made this decision. It's exclusive of anything else that's going on in our football club.
When the side is performing as it is, I recognise that with others, I believe I'm part of the problem quite clearly. The real question that I've grappled with in the last probably couple of weeks since the season finished is, am I also part of the solution? And I guess my feeling in the conversations I've had and in my personal self-reflections, I've reached the decision that I believe it's best to hand over to a fresh face with a new voice to move the club forward.
We want to find the best possible person, not the person that we can find the quickest. So it's an important decision, and we'll identify the criteria that we're looking to match against potential candidates. We'll go through that process as quickly as we can, but it'll take as long as it needs to find the best person.
I would like to make one quick comment around AFL footy. The landscape we now operate in as an industry is more challenging than ever for players, administrators, boards, coaches, and this is leading to a wide range of issues around contentment. I hope that in the future we can find a better balance in how we view the game, regardless of result. Otherwise, I do fear for the people's genuine love of the game.
That's how 4 years came to a close with a salient point at the end. But what sat most heavily, am I part of the solution, was the question that he'd asked himself. And the answer that he came up with was no.
As I said, a man of integrity, Don Pyke. And I really like the way Rob Chapman spoke today as well. The chairman, he made an error when he said they're looking at a payout. He's later clarified that and said, no, there won't be. Don Pyke resigned. I would imagine if you're in Don Pyke's situation, you'd ask yourself, am I the problem? Can I be the part of the solution? And clearly, if they've got one on either side, Jared, part of the problem way heavier than am I part of the solution?
Yeah. So there's a critical mass of players who were not going to continue if things didn't change.
They might not continue. They might not continue as well.
They may not, and Don is not the singular issue there.
Would you be?
I think once the coach became aware of that, that has fed into his thinking heavily.
Several times today, Don Pyke said, what's best for the footy club? And good football people say, what's best for the football club? If I'm not the best for it, I'll step away. So I'll say it again, my reading on this, that Don Pyke walks away with tremendous integrity. They just lost their way, the Crows. So we've lost the captain. Yeah. Tex Walker stood down. Yep. The coaches stood down. There's going to be more. I don't think you can have a clean sweep of all the senior positions. I mean, we're talking Chapman, the chairman, we're talking Fagan, the CEO, we're talking Risciuto, the football director, we're talking Brett Burton, the head of football. Does the club remove all those four? I think that's too much. I think Chapman will be looking at his position. Clearly, Burton's under some strain. The CEO has to take responsibility because he's running the administration of the club. But I don't think you can get rid of all of them, Jared. You've got to keep some in place. Who that is, I don't know. But, yeah, were you surprised? I was shocked, but I wasn't surprised. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get that.
Oh, well, OK.
Yeah.
No worries.
I didn't think Don would be the coach next year, and it doesn't surprise me that he did it of his own volition for the qualities that you've outlined there. This broke after the grand final loss in 2017, and Rob Chapman has sort of formally conceded on radio in the follow-up interviews that the camp dogs them.
Absolutely.
And those events, it's very real, and they haven't owned those for a period of time internally. It's got nothing to do with the external. This is all about the relationships between those who run the club and their players. And those relationships have been fractured ever since that moment. They've never been adequately addressed, and they've never been adequately repaired. Their on-field play has been a reflection of that unease and the reckoning that was coming. This is well, it's not the first step of the reckoning. This is part of the reckoning. As you rightly point out, the captain had already handed back the reins, and now the coach is gone, and it won't end there.
No, it won't. You know, when we have everyone in football talking about these words, and people say, they're just words. Connection and trust. When good teams are playing well, you feel it, you sort of see it. So when Jack Riewoldt sits there and talks to us every Tuesday for the last couple of years and talks about the trust at the club, when they play football, you can see it. And here's an example of Adelaide where they've lost the connection and they've lost the trust. One week, there's stories coming out of Adelaide, their performance, their up and down performances. They lost control. The football club lost control of what it was to be a football club. And when that happens, they had the review, and people have to, unfortunately, thanks for your time, but you have to move on. And Don Pyke put his hand up and said, I've got to move on. I had a great time, I did my best, but this club needs new air.
Dealing with grand final defeat has been historically imprecise, but they will stand as an ultimate cautionary tale in how it can fall apart in the aftermath, from the minutes to the days to the months that linked the end of one season when they had been the best team throughout 2017. They weren't the best team on the final day, to where they have been a middling team for 2 years ever since.
You always like using the word cautionary tale. I don't know how this is going to come out, but I'm just going to start talking to it. And I mean this. So you get to a grand final. What do we have to do to improve? We've got to get mentally tougher. We've got to get physically tougher. We've got to get mentally tougher. Come on, let's go on a camp. We're going to push these guys to the limit. Maybe that was yesteryear thinking. Let's really get them to the edge of their mental strength, and we'll see who survives, and the strongest will stand up. And it didn't work. They got to the end of the cliff, and collectively they almost all fell over the cliff. So what I've learned is, in the last 12 months, when everyone talks about, these kids, they're different. They're different. The young men of today, they're different. This is the biggest cautionary tale in football in my time of these people have changed. And half of me thinks sometimes, you know what, it is a tough sport. And they're going to get pushed, and there's going to be hurdles, and there's going to be ditches, and you've got to jump over them. You don't have to stop every time and say, God, this is too hard. You know, so everyone's looking at Burton, and everyone's looking at Pyke and Fagan and the club and Rashudo. But I wonder if the players actually looking at themselves, right? Can you look at the playing group and say, you know what, we might have stuffed up on the camp, but were you mentally tough enough anyway to deal with it? You know, this is a really complex issue in football.
Yep. And
clubs will be looking at Adelaide and say, did they do the right thing? Did they do the wrong thing? Even Rui said last week with Melbourne, you know, they said, we don't want to go on a camp. And Rui, I think it was Rui, please tell me it was Rui. And he says, we're going to go on a camp this year? I reckon they should. So there's Rui's mentality. Rui's mentality is, right out in the face of adversity, I'm going to stick my face right at it and say, righto, let's go. Let's go. But at Adelaide, it fell apart when they had that adversity.
So the coaching market is 3 caretakers all got their jobs.
Righto.
Fremantle in the market and Adelaide now in the market.
Blighty threw up Don Pyke for Fremantle.
He did. You know what? I spoke to Blighty when the review was first announced. I said to him, if you were Don Pyke, would you toss the keys back? And he said to me, you know I would. And I said to him, do you reckon Fremantle should go and try to pull him out of there right now while this uncertainty is swirling? And what he said today just makes a lot of sense, is if you're Fremantle and you're a third of the way through your process, half the way through your process, you'd have to sit down with Don Pyke, wouldn't you?
Probably.
Just to find out.
Yeah. And he absolutely left no one in doubt today that he wants to continue coaching.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, it's an interesting one. So, is Longmire spoken to Fremantle?
Longmuir, yeah.
Longmuir,
yeah,
Longmuir?
Yes, but I don't...
I don't know how advanced that is, mate.
Yeah, I'm not sure they've got to their final stage yet.
I think we had a situation after every club loses a coach, the first names that go up generally don't get the job.
Yeah.
Within 3.5 minutes in this crazy social media world that we live in, it was Longmuir or Peter Sumich. And then suddenly people throw in Don Pyke. People go, that's a good one, isn't it? That's interesting. So there'll be a market up for Adelaide. Do you know the Adelaide?
No. So I saw Scott Burns and John...
Remember I mentioned
Justin
Scott Burns to you about 6 weeks ago?
Yeah.
And you looked at me as if to say, what are you talking... I don't know what you're looking at me like. Someone told me that Scott Burns was preparing for a senior coaching job.
Yep.
Now, Chapman came out today and said, no, we've contacted nobody. Nobody. I don't always believe that. I'm not saying you're a liar, Rob. Absolutely don't take that. But people have conversations with people. We're offering them jobs to say, would you be interested if something happened? Well, let's watch this space.